Look at this photograph. A husband and wife, frozen in time, their faces blank as porcelain masks. You see respectability. You see wealth. You see a perfect marriage. But I see something else. I see the moment before everything shattered. The woman in this image, Isabella Fairchild, is standing 3 feet from a man she will soon bury. And here's what no one knew. By the time his body went cold in the ground, she had already decided that 3 other men would follow him into ruin. This is not a love story. This is a reckoning. If you love dark historical tales like this, hit that subscribe button now, because you won't want to miss what happens next. In the autumn of 1825, in the heart of England's countryside, a woman named Isabella Fairchild walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk. She was 23 years old, with dark hair pinned beneath a veil of French lace, and she believed she was walking toward happiness. By winter, she would be a widow. By spring, she would become something else entirely. Something the polite society of Georgian England had no name for. This is the ballad of Isabella Fairchild, bride, widow, and avenger. A story of betrayal so complete it transformed a gentle soul into an instrument of calculated vengeance. What you are about to hear is not a tale of justice. Justice, after all, is what the courts provide. This is a story about something darker, something that lives in the space between right and wrong, where grief meets rage and creates something new. In the months that followed her wedding, Isabella would discover that the man she married was not a man at all, but a collection of lies wrapped in expensive tailoring. She would learn that her wedding vows were nothing more than a legal trap. And when death came calling to her marriage bed, she would find that sometimes the only way to escape a serpent's coil is to become the serpent yourself. The year 1825 was a time of rigid rules and stricter expectations. Women of Isabella's class were taught to be ornamental, obedient, and above all, silent. They were pawns in games of property and prestige, moved across the board by fathers and husbands who viewed them as assets to be managed. Isabella had been raised to accept this fate with grace. But fate, as it turned out, had other plans. In the grand estate of Blackwood Manor, in a bedroom decorated with all the trappings of wealth and privilege, a secret festered. A secret that would cost one man his life, and another man everything he held dear. Isabella Fairchild was about to learn that the price of truth is steep, but the price of vengeance is steeper still. She would pay it willingly. This story begins with a wedding, as so many tragedies do. But it ends with something far more interesting. It ends with a reckoning. Isabella Fairchild had been raised in modest comfort. Her father was a country physician, respected but not wealthy. Her mother had died when Isabella was 12, leaving her to manage the household and care for her younger brother. She learned early how to stretch a budget, how to mend clothes, how to make do with less. She was practical, intelligent, and blessed with a face that men called handsome rather than beautiful. At 23, she had accepted that marriage might not come at all. Then Sir Edmund Blackwood arrived in her village. He was 42 years old, a widower with no children, and the owner of Blackwood Manor, an estate that sprawled across 300 acres of prime English countryside. He had come to consult her father about persistent headaches, but it was Isabella who caught his attention. He courted her with the confidence of a man who had never been refused anything. Within 6 weeks, they were engaged. Within 3 months, they were married. Isabella's father was relieved. Her brother was thrilled. And Isabella herself felt something that might have been happiness. or might have been simply the absence of worry about her future. The wedding was grand beyond anything Isabella had imagined. Sir Edmund spared no expense. There were flowers shipped from London, musicians brought in from the city, and enough food to feed the entire village twice over. Isabella wore a gown of ivory silk that cost more than her father earned in a year. She felt like a princess in a fairy tale. She did not yet know that fairy tales, the old ones, are full of monsters. Blackwood Manor was even more impressive than she had imagined. The entrance hall alone was larger than the entire house she had grown up in. There were servants everywhere, moving through the corridors like ghosts, attending to tasks Isabella did not fully understand. Her new bedroom had a 4-poster bed draped in velvet, a wardrobe filled with dresses she had never seen before, and windows that overlooked gardens so perfect they seemed painted. Sir Edmund was attentive in those first weeks. He showered her with gifts. He introduced her to his neighbors, all of whom treated her with the careful politeness reserved for those who have married above their station. He taught her how to manage the household accounts, though he reviewed every decision she made. He explained that as his wife, she represented him, and representation required perfection. The first crack in the facade appeared 3 weeks after the wedding. Isabella had gone into the village to visit her father and had stayed longer than planned, lost in conversation about her brother's studies. When she returned to Blackwood Manor, Sir Edmund was waiting in the entrance hall. His face was calm, but his voice was ice. He asked where she had been. She explained. He listened without interrupting, then informed her that in the future, she would inform him of her plans before leaving the estate. It was not a discussion. It was an order. Isabella felt a flutter of unease, but she told herself this was normal. Husbands had authority over their wives. This was the way of things. The second crack appeared a week later. Isabella had rearranged some flowers in the drawing room, thinking to brighten the space. Sir Edmund saw them and asked who had given her permission to make changes to his home. She stammered that she had thought it would be nice. He calmly removed every flower she had placed, returned them to their original positions, and told her that the manor had been arranged by his first wife, and those arrangements would not be altered. That night, Isabella lay awake in the dark, listening to her husband's steady breathing beside her, and wondered what kind of house she had entered. December came to Blackwood Manor with frost and fog. The hedgerows turned white, the gardens went dormant, and inside the great house, Isabella learned to move quietly through her days. She had discovered that silence was safer than speech. Obedience was easier than argument. Sir Edmund's rules had multiplied like weeds. She could not enter his study without permission. She could not correspond with friends without his review of the letters. She could not dismiss or hire servants. She could not choose her own clothing for social events. Every aspect of her life was controlled, managed, perfected, and yet, to the outside world, they appeared to be the ideal couple. Then, on a gray morning 2 days before Christmas, Sir Edmund went riding. He was an excellent horseman, confident and skilled. The stableman had saddled his favorite mount, a black gelding named Midnight. The ground was hard with frost, but not icy. The weather was cold but clear. There was no reason for what happened next. Sir Edmund was found 3 hours later at the bottom of a ravine on the eastern edge of his property. His neck was broken. Midnight was grazing nearby, uninjured and calm. The saddle had come loose, they said. A tragic accident. A terrible twist of fate. Sir Edmund Blackwood was dead at 42, and Isabella Fairchild was a widow at 23. The funeral was enormous. It seemed the entire county came to pay their respects to Sir Edmund. Isabella stood in black mourning dress, accepting condolences from people whose names she barely knew. They spoke of her husband as if he had been a saint. Kind, generous, beloved. She nodded and thanked them and felt absolutely nothing. The solicitor came to Blackwood Manor a week after the burial. He explained that Sir Edmund's will was quite clear. Isabella inherited the estate, the fortune, and all property associated with the Blackwood name. She was, overnight, one of the wealthiest women in the county. She should have felt relief, or grief, or something. Instead, she felt suspended in a strange numbness, as if she were watching her life happen to someone else. The servants treated her differently now, with more deference, more distance. She was no longer Sir Edmund's wife, subject to his authority and, by extension, theirs. She was Lady Blackwood, their employer, the woman who could dismiss them with a word. It was Mrs. Hartley, the housekeeper, who gave Isabella the first key to unlocking the truth. Mrs. Hartley had served the Blackwood family for 30 years. She was a severe woman with gray hair pulled back, so tightly it seemed to pull her face with it. 2 weeks after Sir Edmund's death, she came to Isabella with a ring of keys. These were the household keys, she explained. The keys to every room, every cabinet, every locked door in Blackwood Manor, including, she said with particular emphasis, the study, Sir Edmund's private study, which had been locked since his death. Isabella took the keys. That afternoon, when the house was quiet, she unlocked the study door. The room smelled of leather and tobacco. Sir Edmund's desk sat in the center, its surface clear except for an inkwell and a leather blotter. Isabella began opening drawers. The first 3 contained exactly what she expected. Correspondence about estate business, account books, bills of sale. The 4th drawer was locked. Isabella tried every key on the ring. None fit. She felt around the edges of the drawer, looking for a hidden catch, and her fingers found something taped to the underside of the desktop. A small key. Her hands were shaking as she used it to unlock the drawer. Inside was a single leather portfolio, tied with string. Isabella untied it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all written in the same hand, all addressed to Sir Edmund, all signed with the initial M. Isabella began to read. By the time she finished the first letter, her hands had stopped shaking. By the time she finished the 3rd, she understood. And by the time she closed the portfolio, Isabella Fairchild had become someone new. The letters told a story that made Isabella's blood turn cold. They were written by a man named Michael Torrance, a business associate of Sir Edmund's from London. The early letters were friendly, discussing investments and opportunities. Then they shifted. Torrance was asking for money, then begging for it, then threatening. Sir Edmund, it seemed, had entered into a partnership with Torrance to invest in a textile mill. The mill had failed, as mills sometimes do, and both men had lost money. But Sir Edmund had done something worse than lose money. He had falsified records to make it appear that Torrance was solely responsible for the failure. He had used his connections and his reputation to destroy Torrance's name in London business circles. And when Torrance threatened to expose the truth, Sir Edmund had done something that Isabella could barely comprehend. He had framed Torrance for embezzlement. The letters detailed everything. Torrance had been arrested, tried, and sentenced to 7 years in a debtor's prison. His wife had died of fever while he was imprisoned. His children had been sent to the workhouse, all because Sir Edmund Blackwood wanted to protect his reputation and his fortune. The final letter was dated 3 weeks before Sir Edmund's death. Torrance had been released early for good behavior. He was coming to Blackwood Manor. He was going to expose everything. He was going to ruin Sir Edmund the way Sir Edmund had ruined him. Isabella sat in the study for a long time after reading that last letter, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. Her husband had not been a gentleman. He had been a thief and a liar who had destroyed an entire family to save himself from embarrassment. And now he was dead, conveniently dead, just before his crimes could be exposed. Isabella went back to the drawer and searched more carefully. At the very bottom, beneath the letters, she found a receipt from the village saddler, dated a week before Sir Edmund's death. It was for repairs to a saddle. Sir Edmund's saddle, the very saddle that had supposedly come loose and caused his fall. Why would a saddle need repairs 1 week and fail catastrophically the next? Isabella's mind began to work in ways it never had before. She thought about the ravine where Sir Edmund had been found. She thought about midnight, calm and uninjured. She thought about Michael Torrance, released from prison with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. Over the next month, Isabella conducted her own investigation. She did it quietly, carefully, always playing the role of the grieving widow. She traveled to London, ostensibly to meet with Sir Edmund's solicitors about the estate. While there, she made inquiries about Michael Torrance. She learned that he was living in a boarding house in Whitechapel, working as a clerk, barely surviving. She learned that he had been seen in the county 3 weeks before Sir Edmund's death, asking questions about Blackwood Manor. She learned that he had purchased a ticket on the mail coach back to London the day after Sir Edmund died. Isabella found the saddler who had repaired Sir Edmund's saddle. The man was nervous when she questioned him, but he eventually admitted that the saddle had been in perfect condition when it left his shop. He had replaced the girth strap himself. It should have lasted for years. She spoke with the stableman who had saddled Midnight that morning. He swore the saddle had been secure when Sir Edmund rode out. He had checked it himself, as he always did. Someone, Isabella realized, had tampered with that saddle after Sir Edmund left the stable. Someone had followed him to the ravine. Someone had waited for the perfect moment. And someone had gotten away with murder. Isabella knew she should go to the authorities. She should present her evidence and let the law handle this. But when she thought about doing that, she felt nothing but cold fury. The law had not protected Michael Torrance when Sir Edmund destroyed him. The law had not questioned the convenient accident that killed her husband. The law, she realized, protected men like Sir Edmund. It did not punish them. As winter turned to spring, Isabella made her decision. If the law would not deliver justice, she would. But it would not be the clumsy, desperate justice of Michael Torrance. It would be something far more precise. Isabella's plan took shape slowly, carefully, like frost forming on a window. She understood that she had something Michael Torrance had never possessed: power, money, and the respectability of the Blackwood name. She also understood that revenge taken in anger is messy. Revenge taken in cold calculation is an art form. Her first target was not Torrance himself, but the men who had helped Sir Edmund destroy him. She started with Lord Ashford, the magistrate who had presided over Torrance's trial. Isabella had discovered that Ashford and Sir Edmund had been friends, that they had dined together regularly, that Ashford had investments in several of Sir Edmund's business ventures. The trial had not been impartial. It had been a performance. Isabella invited Lord Ashford to Blackwood Manor for dinner. She played the helpless widow, concerned about managing the estate, seeking his wise counsel. Over brandy, she asked innocent questions about Sir Edmund's business affairs. She mentioned finding some confusing letters. She wondered aloud about certain investments. She watched Ashford's face grow pale. She saw the moment he realized that she knew. Then she smiled sweetly and told him she was planning to donate a large sum of money to the local orphanage in Sir Edmund's memory. She thought it would be appropriate, given how much her husband had cared about justice and the welfare of the unfortunate. She paused, unless, of course, Lord Ashford thought that might draw unwanted attention to Sir Edmund's charitable works, which had been so very private. Ashford understood. He left Blackwood Manor a shaken man. Within a month, he had resigned his position as magistrate, citing ill health. Within 2 months, he had sold his estate and moved to Scotland. One down. Next was Thomas Blackwell, the businessman who had testified against Torrance, claiming to have witnessed him stealing from the company accounts. Isabella had discovered that Blackwell's testimony had been purchased. Sir Edmund had forgiven a substantial debt in exchange for Blackwell's lies. Isabella approached this differently. She bought the debt from the creditor who now held it. Then she called it in. Blackwell came to her, desperate, begging for the same mercy Sir Edmund had shown. Isabella listened to his pleas. Then she offered him a choice. He could confess his perjury in writing, a confession she would hold, or he could face debtor's prison himself. He wrote the confession with shaking hands. 2 down. The third man was harder. His name was Richard Pemberton, Sir Edmund's solicitor, the man who had prepared the false documents that had sealed Torrance's fate. Pemberton was clever and careful. He would not be frightened easily. Isabella needed something more substantial. She spent weeks going through Sir Edmund's papers, learning the details of every transaction, every deal, every piece of legal maneuvering her husband had engaged in. And she found it. Pemberton had not only helped Sir Edmund frame Torrance, he had embezzled from other clients, hiding the theft in complicated legal language and obscure fees. Sir Edmund had known about it. He had kept records, probably as insurance against Pemberton ever turning against him. Isabella now held that insurance. She invited Pemberton to Blackwood Manor. She laid out the evidence calmly, methodically. She explained that she had copies stored with 3 separate solicitors in London, to be opened if anything happened to her. Then she told him what he was going to do. He was going to write to the court that had convicted Michael Torrance. He was going to explain that new evidence had come to light. He was going to request that the case be reviewed. And he was going to recommend that Torrance be exonerated and compensated for his wrongful imprisonment. If he did this, Isabella would keep his secrets. If he refused, she would destroy him. Pemberton did as he was told. 3 down. By summer, the case against Michael Torrance had been officially overturned. His name was cleared. The court issued a formal apology, and Isabella arranged for a substantial sum of money, drawn from Sir Edmund's estate, to be paid to Torrance as compensation. She did all of this anonymously, through intermediaries, never revealing her role. But there was one more piece to her plan. The most important piece, she wrote a letter to Michael Torrance. In it, she explained everything. She told him about the letters she had found, about Sir Edmund's crimes, about the men who had helped him. She told him about the investigation she had conducted, and then she told him the truth about Sir Edmund's death. Isabella's letter to Michael Torrance was not an accusation. It was an absolution. She wrote that she had spent months investigating her husband's death. She had examined the evidence, interviewed witnesses, and followed every thread. And she had concluded that the official verdict was correct. Sir Edmund Blackwood had died in a tragic riding accident. The saddle had failed. It was no one's fault. These things happen. She wrote that she understood why someone might have wanted Sir Edmund dead. She understood the rage that comes from injustice. She understood the desire for revenge. But she also understood that taking a life, no matter how justified it might feel, destroys the person who takes it as surely as it destroys the victim. She did not mention that she knew Torrance had been in the county when Sir Edmund died. She did not mention the saddler's testimony or the convenient timing. She simply stated that she had found no evidence of foul play, and therefore, the matter was closed. Then she told him that his name had been cleared, that compensation had been arranged, and that he was free to rebuild his life. She wished him well. She signed the letter as Lady Isabella Blackwood. She never expected a reply. But 3 weeks later, one came. Torrance's letter was brief. He thanked her for her investigation. He told her that he had indeed been filled with rage, that he had traveled to Blackwood with dark intentions, but that he had left without acting on them. He had realized that becoming a murderer would not bring his wife back or undo the years in prison. It would only compound the tragedy. He thanked her for the exoneration and the compensation. And then he wrote something that Isabella would remember for the rest of her life. He wrote that revenge does not heal wounds. It only creates new ones. And that the truest form of justice is not punishment, but the restoration of what was taken. He was taking his compensation and moving to America, where he would start over. He would remember Sir Edmund Blackwood, not as the man who destroyed him, but as the man whose widow had saved him. The letter troubled Isabella more than she wanted to admit. She had orchestrated the downfall of 3 men. She had stripped them of their positions, their reputations, and their peace of mind. She had done it in the name of justice, but she had enjoyed it. She had felt powerful. And now Torrance, the man who had actually suffered, was telling her that revenge was hollow. Isabella spent the summer walking the grounds of Blackwood Manor, thinking about what she had become. She had entered this house as a naive young woman who believed in fairy tales. She had lost that innocence in stages, learning that the world was cruel and that goodness was not rewarded. She had transformed herself into an Avenger, cold and calculating, capable of destroying men without hesitation. And now she had to decide who she would be next. She could remain Lady Blackwood, wealthy and powerful, ruling over this estate like a queen. She could continue to use her resources to punish wrongdoing, becoming a sort of dark angel of justice. Or she could let it all go. In the end, Isabella made a choice that surprised even herself. She sold Blackwood Manor. She donated half the proceeds to the orphanage and the other half to a fund for families affected by wrongful imprisonment. She moved back to the small village where she had grown up, bought a modest house near her father, and spent her days teaching children to read. She never married again. She never spoke of her time at Blackwood Manor except in the vaguest terms. And when people asked if she missed the wealth and status, she smiled and said that she had learned the price of both, and it was too high. But sometimes on cold autumn evenings, Isabella would sit by her fire and think about the girl who had walked down the aisle in an ivory silk gown. That girl had believed that marriage would save her. She had learned instead that the only person who could save her was herself. And in learning that lesson, she had become something she had never imagined. Not a bride, not a widow, but a woman who understood that power without wisdom is just another form of cruelty. The Ballad of Isabella Fairchild is not a happy story, but it is a true one. If you enjoyed this dark tale from 1825, make sure to subscribe for more stories from history's shadows. Hit the like button if Isabella's journey resonated with you, and leave a comment telling us what you would have done in her place. Sometimes the most haunting stories are the ones that remind us what we are capable of when pushed to our limits. Until next time, remember that every historical tale has layers we never see, and sometimes the real monsters wear respectable faces.